I had a big week. I turned 40 this week, yeah. It's interesting, like turning 40 is like, I think it's one of those numbers that kind of like brings people out from your past in a good way. I just got like so many birthday wishes, sometimes from people I'm like, who are they, So a really long list of people that wished me a happy birthday on that day. And so really thankful for that. Also a very long list of people who didn't. So we'll just, being 40, over the last kind of few months, I've been reflecting a lot, and the things that I'm grateful for. And one of those things is this church. And when I say that, I don't mean the institution of this church. I'm thankful for the institution of this church, but I'm thankful for y'all. And there was a time in my life when I thought I could never be a pastor again, at least not in a traditional sense. And a lot of it had to do with that I just felt like the church, in many ways, was following the same rhythms of society, and that it was just kind of like siloing out on all the things we don't agree on, right? And we'll just keep breaking up and breaking up and breaking up. And over the last few years, we've been able to have some real conversations. And in our church gathered right now are people who believe all kinds of things about all kinds of different things. And we're able to keep showing up and be in this community together and have those kinds of conversations. So one of those conversations I want to have actually starts next week in the month of November, right? Is that what's next? It's October still? Okay. The month of November, we're going to have a series of teachings for 4 weeks called Why I Stopped Going to Church. It's going to be a doozy, all right? One of the things in my own life that has been just true of me is that I've been a bit of a pastoral magnet for people who have left the church. And also for folks who are trying to maybe put it back together, that for very good reasons left the church and are in a place where they're trying to put the pieces back together. And so I've sat with so many people trying to reconstruct a faith after leaving. And I wanted to maybe take a few weeks and share some of the handles that have helped people that I've walked with over the few years in reconstructing their faith. One of those handles, one of the sermons is a sermon that I wrote as I was getting ready for my 40th birthday. I was looking back at some old journals, and 13 years ago, I wrote a sermon in a journal of mine that I thought, I'll never be able to preach this in church. They'll run me out with a pitchfork, right? Which shows the kind of churches I imagined I'd be preaching in. But that's going to be the first teaching of this series. I want to talk about some of the stuff that maybe has been groaning in me for now over a decade and share some of this. So some of you are here in the early stages of trying to put your faith back together. I think you'll find this series helpful. Some of you, probably all of us, have friends who have left church and are maybe trying to put things back together. This would be a great series, a great month to invite them to come with you to church. Just tell them up front, and if at any point they need to leave, it's appropriate to leave. That coming once doesn't mean you're like signing over your life in blood. Make sure they know that they're free to come and free to go. I think that's important for people in this season of life. But I think it'd be a great time to be inviting those folks. Fair enough? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the 8th practice in this series we've been calling People Like Us, practices that have formed the people of God now for thousands of years. This last practice is called being with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely. Being with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely. And the majority of today's teaching is actually on those first two words. It's being with. It's like, how are we with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely? And I want to start this teaching maybe at like 10,000 feet with a quote from Jesus that is sometimes referred to as the greatest commandment. Why is it called the greatest commandment? Well, someone came to Jesus and said, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And this is what he said, okay? So let's look at this together. Jesus said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. So what Jesus is about to do is kind of give a second commandment. And what he's not doing is saying the most important commandment is love God. And the second most important commandment is to love your neighbor, which we're about to read. What he's saying is actually just like it. That loving God and loving your neighbor are tied up in each other. They're all bound up in the same commandment. The second is just like it. You must love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let's look at this for a second. And first of all, I want to look at the person giving this commandment is Jesus, who in the story we refer to as Emmanuel. We'll talk about that over Christmas, won't we? Which quite literally means God with us. So the commandment is to love this God who is present with us. It's not loving this God who is out there and far away. It's not this abstract idea, but it's this love this God who is with us. Now, the second part is to love your neighbor. The assumption in the commandment is that if God is with us, God is also with our neighbor, right? So how do we love God with all our mind and soul and being? Well, we do that also by loving our neighbor who God is also with. It's really all about loving God. But that's not where the teaching ends, isn't it? It's love your neighbor as how? Yourself. I think this is another point towards presence. What is it to love yourself? Where are you most present? Well, you are most present with you. Now, some of us are in therapy working on being more present with ourselves, right? But no one knows what it's like to be you in the way that you know what it's like to be you. Now, I don't want to send anyone into an existential crisis with that one statement, right? But you are most present to yourself. Nobody else is more present to you than you are with you. So when Emmanuel says the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, with all your being and all your mind, it's the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. It's that you love your neighbor as yourself. The entire commandment is about love inside of presence. So today, what is it to be with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely? Well, we practice that together. Right now as we gather in here, there's some littles over in the other part of the building. And one of the things I really appreciate as a parent about the approach towards children in our community is that the adults who are with our kids right now aren't there to teach them something. They're not there to try and convince them of something. Now, certainly kids are learning things over there, of course, but their primary mandate is to be with the kids, to be present to them, to be with them where they are at and whatever they might be walking through, that we are with our littles. That being with the least, and we'll dig a little bit more into this today, but as a community, we have partners, right, that we are with, that we partner with in the community around this. We've got, we heard about one earlier today. We Can Make a Difference, and we partner with them as they serve thousands of families in our community over the holidays, and we come alongside them every year and say, what is an item that you're having a hard time collecting for that store? We will collect it. It's one of the ways in which we are with the least in our community. The lost, when we use the word lost, it's depending on your upbringing, that can mean a lot of different things in the church. The way Jesus used the word lost was people who had been ostracized from their community because they didn't quite fit in for one reason or another, right? And so it's been very evident in the way we try to at least talk about our church is that we're a church for anyone, right? The implication is we want to be a church that no matter how ostracized you've been from your community or your faith community, we'd like to be a community that could be with you and receive you. It's a part of who we are and who we're continuing to try and be. And being with the lonely. We've got this group in our church called the Justice Task Force. They meet a couple times a month, and their mandate is to be good news where there's the least amount of good news. And recently, some really cool stuff has been coming out of their shared work here. And one of the things is there's a group of them that have started visiting some of the senior care facilities just right around our church. And what I love about their approach is they went in and they started building relationships with some of the folks who run these facilities. And they said, we want to just visit with some of the people who live here who receive the least amount of visitors. Man, being with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely is just a practice that we share in. It becomes a part of our DNA. It's not something we ever achieve, but we continue to live into and grow in and learn in the ways that can help shape us in the way of Jesus. I want to talk today about some of the different ways in society that we show up for each other. Actually, we created this kind of little diagram here, and there's kind of 4 different ways that we maybe see that we can show up together. Sometimes we show up for people by working for them, right? Maybe the posture here or the power dynamic is we solve a problem for somebody. It often rests this dynamic of like, I have what you need, right? I'm going to do this for you. I have something you need. The goal often in working for someone is to fix something or improve something or to maybe rescue someone from something. We see this example in a lot of charitable work, charities in our society. One party provides a resource or a solution to another party in need. The critique of working for is that often working for actually increases inequality. It keeps one person as the helper and someone else as the helped, right? It's about achievement rather than the relationship. One of the other ways we show up with people is working with people. The posture of working with is very collaborative, right? The dynamic is often, hey, let's solve this together. You and me, we're gonna solve this together. The goal is that we can share in the work and that there's some kind of mutual benefit in working with. We see this a lot in community development initiatives, a lot of like partnership projects. This is a lot of the work actually Justice Task Force does in our community, partnering with different folks in our community who are moving or sharing in the same desire. The critique of this work is that it defines the relationship by the task at hand. And so once the work is done, what happens with the relationship? Often in working with, in this collaboration, it's about doing something rather than dwelling with someone. So sometimes then we show up and we're being for. The posture of being for is about advocacy, right? It's I'm on your side. Advocacy has a goal, often to defend, to represent, or champion another. We see this a lot in folks or times when we speak up for the marginalized or the oppressed. Really important work often is being for those who don't necessarily have a voice to be for themselves. But the critique of being for is that while it is often seen as being very morally strong, it still creates distance. One is acting on behalf of the other rather than alongside of them. It risks maintaining this protector and protected vibe, right? Like I'm the protector and you are the protected. And I think the invitation of the way of Jesus over and over and over again is actually this 4th space. It's being with. The posture is about presence. It's about presence. The dynamic of the relationship is that we belong to each other. We belong to each other. The goal is shared life. It's shared life in both joy and suffering, being with. Some of you maybe have experienced this in a friendship. Do you have a friend like this who's like with you no matter what? I got some hands going up, some nudges, people next to them, right? Being with, it's this sometimes experience in true friendship. I think this is actually the center of this cosmic story the Bible tells. This God who is seemingly distant and far off comes and incarnates, becomes human to be with humanity. This is something I work on a lot actually as a pastor. I try to exhibit this presence in pastoral care. I struggle with it, but I work at it. See, the big claim here is at the heart of the gospel is that God relates to the world through the incarnation of Jesus. God relates to the world through presence. That being with is not a strategy for change. Being with is not a strategy for change. Being with is the change itself. That for many of us, our instinct or our natural place to end up is working for, working with, being for, but being with is this strategy for change. Now, I don't want to suggest that these other categories are wrong or don't work. Working for is essential in emergencies, right? When someone can't help themselves. I'm 40 years old, and I have an irrational fear of water. Actually, let me change that. I have a rational fear of water because I can't swim. There have been at least 3 times in my life when I've had to be pulled out, or else I would not have made it to 40, okay? Sometimes we have to work for people when they can't help themselves. Working with is sometimes and often vital in building justice in our communities and building cooperation in our communities, right? Sometimes the work of building justice and cooperation, having a more just community, is about working alongside and with others who share in those same goals. Sometimes being for really matters when truth needs to be spoken to power. Sometimes being for really matters when truth needs to be spoken to power. My wife and I, when our kids were younger, we spent 6-7 years receiving teenage foster kids into our home. And we all know, right, that kids often need advocacy. Kids without parents really need advocacy. And there were many, many times as we journeyed with different teenagers who had no parents that we had to speak truth to power, speak truth to a system that was allegedly for them, that was doing nothing of value for them at all. Sometimes we need to speak truth to power and be for. So there are times when we work for, times when we work with, and times when we be for. But every one of them should find their meaning in being with. That being with is what gives Jesus-shaped energy to working with, working for, and being for. When we can be with and work for, it helps us not patronize people, right? When we can be with and work with, we can have collaboration that's not transactional with people. It's about the relationships, right? When we can be with and be for, the advocacy is grounded in love, not superiority. It's not I'm for you because I'm better than you or need to remain better than you. It's because I'm with you and I love you and you love me. See, the point here is that being with is both the origin and fulfillment of God's love. It drives not what we're doing. Oftentimes the what we're doing is the same. It drives how we go about it in the way of Jesus. See, being with doesn't replace the others. It transfigures it. There's a churchy word for you. It transfigures it. Transfigure is this word that means like you take something and you take all of what you already have and you reshape it to do something different with it. And what has come from transfiguring it is now something more beautiful and more whole than it was before. And so being with transfigures how we move through the world, the ways in which we're with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely. Just real talk here. I have some struggles with this. I don't know if you do, but I do. I struggle a lot with this. I prefer like this kind of ideal or elitism that I find shows up in my heart a lot. Like everybody, I just want you to know I've solved our political divide in America. And I'm just going to tell you, if you just go along with what I'm telling you to do, it's all going to be okay, right? You know, like, man, if they would have just listened to me, if they would have just done this, like if they would have just done that, then they wouldn't be in this situation. If they would have just known the things I know, if they would have read the book that I read, if they would have had the conversation I had, if they would have had my upbringing, then they wouldn't be in this situation, right? I have this kind of idealistic view. I set this bar, and you either are above that bar or below that bar, and guess who set that bar? This guy. Sometimes the boundaries for me in this have to do with this kind of heroism, right? I want to be the hero. Here's what I must do to solve this. Hey, I know you're going through this situation right now, but let me tell you, do I have a solution for you? I'm going to swoop in. You just sit right here. I'm going to fix all of this for you. And then I'm going to swoop back out, and you can go and tell all your friends how awesome the pastor at Westwinds Church is. He just fixed everything. I had all these problems. He fixed them. Now they're gone. And I just say that I often am much more interested in helping someone if I feel like I can be the hero. It's true. I have a lot more energy to help someone if I get to swoop in and be the hero, if it gets to go my way, if I have all the solutions, and then in the end, I can be praised. I'm much more interested in that kind of work. And this is why I think this practice of being with the littles, the least, the lost, and the lonely is this age-old invitation for Christian people to both be transformed and transfigured. That things need to change inside of our being, the way we see the world, how our hearts function. That on the interior, we need a transformation. But the long history of the church is not, that's where it ends. We also then need to be transfigured, where the changes we make in our community are also practically good in the world. They also help us collectively practice presence with the littles, least, and lost, and lonely of our society. A couple weeks ago, Pastor Phil preached a sermon on sharing our resources. Some of you might remember this teaching. Pastor Phil, over the last 2.5 years, I think has spoken here, but probably 25 to 30 times in the last 2.5 years. That message for me ranks as number 2 on my all-time favorite Pastor Phil teachings. It's worth going back and listening to. It came out of him. It was really incredible. But he shared this story from the book of Acts. The early church is described in Acts chapter 4. And I actually want to go back to the text he shared a couple weeks ago. And I want us to see the ways in which transformation is happening in the hearts of people. And transfiguration is happening in the body or the community of people. And how that is making a difference in the world around them. Acts chapter 4, starting in verse 32, says, the community of believers was one in heart and mind. None of them would say, this is mine, about any of their possessions, but held everything in common. The apostles continued to bear powerful witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and an abundance of grace was at work among them all. So the grace of God is changing their interior, right? An abundance of grace was at work among them all. But there was a transfiguration too. Hear this sentence. There were no needy persons among them. They had such changed the way they operate that there were 0 needy people among them. Those who owned properties or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds of the sales and place them under the care and under the authority of the apostles. Then it was distributed to anyone who was in need. There's transformation and transfiguration. Romans chapter 12, the apostle Paul is writing this church to this group of people in Rome who are starting kind of the first Jesus-shaped, Jesus-centered church in Rome. He says to them, brothers and sisters, because of God's mercies, I encourage you to present your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice pleasing to God. This is your appropriate priestly service. It says, don't be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So one of the things that Jesus wants to do through his mercy and grace is to change your mind about some things. There's a transformation that happens in the way that we look at the world. There's a transformation that happens in our value system. There's a transformation that happens in the way we categorize certain kinds of people. He says, but the reason we do this is so that you can figure out what God's will is. Now, this is a practical statement from the Apostle Paul. Allow God to change your minds, to transform your minds, so that you can figure out what God's will is for you all to live out in Rome as this early church. You want to figure out what God's will is for your church? Well, have God change your minds and then transfigure the way in which you operate. This is which is good and pleasing and mature. One of, I think, the most difficult teachings of Jesus is found in Matthew chapter 25. And this is actually where I want to bring our whole message today. And I just want to say out loud a couple things. One is I have wrestled with this passage for like 2 decades, okay? I come back to it often. I'm just like, wrestle with it and wrestle with it and wrestle with it. And I think that's why it's written the way it is. We're meant to wrestle with it and wrestle with it and wrestle with it. Matthew chapter 25 says this. It says, now when the human one, in this version, the CEB is the version of the Bible, they use the human one to let the reader know that it's talking about Jesus. So they just want to differentiate in the text. Here's how you know as a reader that what they're talking about is Jesus, right? And so it says, now when the human one comes in his majesty and all his angels are with him, he'll sit on his majestic throne. And all the nations will be gathered in front of him. He will separate them from each other just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right side. I don't know why you chose to sit on this side today, but the rest of this message is going to be much more favorable to you, okay? And the goats he put on his left. I just want to apologize that you sat on this side of the room today, okay? It's nothing personal, okay? You just, for some reason, sat over here. He says, the king will then say to those on his right, come, you who will receive good things from my Father. Inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world began. I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then those who are righteous will reply to him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes to wear? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? Then the king, then Jesus, will reply to those on his right, I assure you that what you have done for the least of these, my brothers and sisters of mine, you've done it for me. Then he will say to those on his left, I just want to apologize one more time. Get away from me, you who will receive terrible things. Go into the unending fire that has been prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, and you didn't give me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me anything to drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't welcome me. It was your pastor's birthday, and you didn't. No, I'm just joking. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothes to wear. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me. Catch this. Then they will reply, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and didn't do anything to help you? Then he will answer, I assure you that when you have done it for one of the least of these, you've done it for me. And they will go into eternal punishment, but the righteous will go into eternal life. I think what's so interesting about this teaching of Jesus is that there's a cue in there for the reader to pay attention to something. Did you notice when the language repeated itself? Did you notice how those on his right and those on his left had the same response? Like, when did we see you hungry or sick or in prison? Like, when did we not come visit you? And I think for the sheep, they're living in a way that eliminates those categories. They're saying like, when did we go and see you in prison? I didn't go see you, Jesus, in prison. I went to see my friend who is in prison. When did we clothe you, Jesus? Like, when did we do that? And they're going, wait, we didn't do that. My friend needed a coat, and I had an extra one. So I got them a coat. My friend had nowhere to live. Of course I sold my field so they could have somewhere to live. That's my friend. That's my friend. I think the goats were like, man, Jesus, if you just would have maybe like told us about the test before we got to the test. Like, we didn't know that doing those things would get us some like cred on this day. We didn't know that would help us climb the religious ladder. We didn't know that was the expectation, that we take care of those who are categorically in these situations. See, the difference is less about what they did and much more about the categories in which we view people in society. For the sheep, they were being so transfigured that those categories were just disappearing from their worldview. For the goats, they're so caught up in the system and culture they live in. These categories continue to exist, and helping the little, the least, and lost and lonely just wasn't their responsibility. See the difference? I think this is centers on like one of the most important pieces of the teachings of Jesus. Is that Jesus is often teaching through this kind of binary of two kingdoms. That there's a kingdom built by people and a kingdom being built, ushered in by the way of Jesus. And I think one of the reasons the teachings of Jesus have spanned the globe and spanned generations is that this divide is true in every kingdom. That every single kingdom built by people throughout history and around the globe, including the kingdom we live in, has been built by people. And in a kingdom built by people, there are always those who have and those who don't. There's always some kind of system that categorically separates people by race or by class or by caste. In certain categories, receive more of the benefits of that kingdom than other categories. That is true about every kingdom around the world ever created by people. And Jesus teaches about this kingdom being ushered in by living in the way of Jesus and living and centering ourselves on the teachings of Jesus, with other people centering on the teachings of Jesus. That while this kingdom over here is systematically building these categories, this kingdom over here is systematically dismantling them and creating a different world through being with the folks who experience these categories. The vision is so much bigger than any of us can just be a hero of. It's so much bigger than like idealistic solutions to really complex problems. The invitation to participate in God's kingdom is centered on presence, on being with the little, the least, the lost, and the lonely over here, as we learn about what it means to participate in God's kingdom. I've wrestled a lot with where to land today, if you would believe it. 3 words that I wanted to kind of have us rest in here at the end. Some of us need courage. Beginning to maybe work through some of the underbelly of the kingdom we live in. It starts to cost us some things, right? It costs us sometimes relationships. Sometimes costs us things that give us a lot of security. And some of us are just rooted in fear that living in the way of Jesus or beginning to wrestle with the kingdom of God is just going to be too costly. And so some of us maybe need to just confess today and that word, just like speak out loud to God. God, I could use some courage. God, would you help me to have a little bit more courage to live in the kingdom of God? Some of us, our struggle is with capacity. Like our lives are so busy. I just got so much going on. Some of us have no emotional space left, right? Like the amount of evil that we hear about in this kingdom we live in, at some point it's just I'm full. I got no more room to know what to do. I'm frozen inside of my own limitations. So maybe some of us, God, could you help me with capacity? God, I need some grace in this. I need the gift. Could you just help me open up a little bit more space in my heart, my life, my mind to participate in your kingdom? And the last one is difficult to talk about. It's compassion or empathy. It's I just don't care. I just don't care. I don't care that in this kingdom I'm just very comfortable in it. I don't care that there are those on the other side, that there are littles, least, lost, and lonely in this kingdom. I'm just really content, really reliant. My whole life is reliant on this kingdom, and I just would like to keep it that way, and I just don't care. And I think it's okay to come to Jesus with that kind of honesty. Just say, God, help me to care. Help me to, you just soften my heart. You help me to see. I'm so blind to it. You help me just to see and to care. I think one of the things that is true of this kingdom, all these kingdoms built by man, is that they're systemically built to form you towards apathy of those that kingdom continues to take advantage of. It's part of the system. It's part of what it's built to do. And if we can name that this kingdom is actually teaching me to not care about the victims of this kingdom, then maybe we can come to Jesus and ask Jesus to form us in a different way. That's actually a huge red flag, right? To read the teachings of Jesus and not care about the littles, least, lost, and lonely. And that red flag, it doesn't need to make us feel like guilt or even shame. It's just a reminder about the things that Jesus taught about more than anything else. This kingdom of God that brings equality among all people. And that is not just an idealistic concept, but it actually is practical too. Jesus calling his people to change the way in which they organize, to have different kinds of systems than the kingdoms in which we're being formed and shaped by. So here's where we're gonna go today. We're gonna sing two songs. One is a song that we're not meant to sing along with. And maybe we could just kind of sit for a minute and think about maybe what this might mean in our own lives, but also to say this call of Jesus is not for you. It's not for you, but it's bigger than us. It's for us, right? What might God be inviting us in? What ways might he be inviting us to change our minds and reorganize the way we're organized, to be transfigured? So maybe think about some of that during the first song. And the second song we're gonna sing is a song you're meant to sing along with. It's a chance to maybe put some words to some of the prayers that might be difficult to get off our hearts today. Let's hang out for just 5-6 minutes more. See what God might do in our hearts.